Hello and welcome to The World This Week with me, Gavin Lee. In a dramatic week in Davos, where the escalating political storm over Greenland was suddenly, apparently, resolved. At least that's how President Trump is presenting it. A framework deal for Denmark's Arctic territory agreed that is, quote, everything we wanted, total security, Trump said. His apparent grab for Greenland gambit has paid off, said the White House. Threats of tariffs, public pressure, brinkmanship, textbook manoeuvres from his art of the deal. Quote, start extreme, keep pushing and settle strong. But at what cost? Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney declared that Trump's actions have ruptured the old world order.
We know the old order is not coming back. We shouldn't mourn it. Nostalgia is not a strategy. But we believe that from the fracture, we can build something bigger, better, stronger, more just.
It's been the week the Board of Peace became an official international organisation. How it started, very different to how it's going. President Trump's initiative was initially given approval and legitimacy by the UN Security Council as part of a plan to end the Gaza war, to oversee governance, reconstruction. Its goal has now been reframed and revealed this week with a global purpose to, quote, resolve conflicts and secure peace, granting Donald Trump lifetime chairmanship, whereby he'll be able to effectively hire and fire who he wants in a club that costs $1 billion to be a permanent member. Putin's invited too. No coincidence, Western European leaders have so far given it a wide berth. Questions abound over whether it's an attempt to replace the UN. Is Trump taking the peace?
I heard about the formation of the peace summit, and I was like, is that PIEC? A little piece of Greenland, a little piece of Venezuela.
we got one.
All we want is peace.
And it's been a week that's seen the map of who controls Syria change again. The interim government of the former Islamists, now in power for over a year, agreed a ceasefire with the Kurdish-led Syrian democratic forces in the north after fierce fighting and a chaotic retreat by the Kurdish fighters, who lost around half of their territory, including reportedly abandoning detention facilities its troops had been guarding, filled with Islamist militants. Syria's army says it's recaptured many, but not all of those escapees from al-Shaddadi prison. The Kurds have accused the US of betrayal after more than a decade of working with Western allies. A famous Kurdish phrase, no friends but the mountains, more apt now than ever.
Both sides actually admit or say that IS prisoners have escaped from Shaddadi prison in southern Hasaka, but they trade blame as to who's responsible for it.
And the four distinguished correspondents joining me this week to discuss how to make Europe grateful again and more are, well, we have Tina Kirkensgaard Hansen, the Paris-based correspondent for the Danish broadcaster Politiken. Hey, Tina, great to have you with us today. Talk about what you've been working on, something non-Greenland related, I believe, this week.
Well, this week I've been covering the Marine Le Pen court case here in Paris, where you know that last year she was ruled out of being able to, because of the fraud in the EU Parliament that was going on from 2004 to 2016, and that ruled her out of the election, the presidential election next year. And the appeal case is now going on in France, and there's been a big story in Paris. There's been a big story this week after a French judge said that last year two American officials tried to kind of intimidate her in order to find elements that the case against her last year should have been politically motivated.
It is a very interesting case. What we're hearing basically how the jury allegedly have been kind of pressured, threatened politely is a word for it, that had suddenly had something to do with basically the bottom line allegation seems to be trying to make sure Marine Le Pen is treated lightly.
Well, that was the case. There was a case that was described by anonymous sources in Der Spiegel, the German news magazine. The other story is more about the fact that this French judge was having this conversation with two American officials who was trying to look for elements, she said, that would prove that the case was political.
Very interesting. Easily missed on the triage of massive stories this week, Dina. Great to have you with us. Let's go to Istanbul. Let's bring in Bozu Deragahi, 3 times Pulitzer Prize finalist, independent journalist, author of the Substack Badlands. Bozu, great to have you with us. In your latest Substack, you've highlighted 3 characters that you say have been hoisted by their own petard this week. They've been victim to their own hubris. Talk us through it.
Oh, that's from days ago. But yeah, I
Still
mean,
this
it
week.
was just a little item I wrote, and it really turned out to be somewhat prophetic in light of what happened a few days later. I don't mean to seem that I'm being hubristic by calling it prophetic. It was just sort of, it was about Gavin Newsom trying to play Ben Shapiro and getting played himself, and essentially being backed into a few different corners by this what one analyst described as a pipsqueak. Unable to sort of play the game. And then there was also another one about another example. I don't even remember at this point. I have goldfish memory. But the more important and more interesting one was how the the Nobel Prize Board tried to play Trump by giving the Nobel Prize to Machado, and essentially showing such poor judgment that they gave a peace prize to someone who tried to use it as a bribe to get a regime change war, and just how bad it is when you try to, how bad it can backfire when you try to suck up to people like this, when you should do what what turned out to be the smartest thing by the Canadian Prime Minister this year, the Canadian Premier in Davos, which is to stand up to bullies and not try to suck up to them.
The other one you mentioned was Gianni Infantino, the Uriah Heep of FIFA, similar vein to Maria. But it did fascinate me because a lot of people would miss this. It was Gavin Newsom going back to what potentially could be the Democratic presidential candidate for 2028. It kind of tried to tame the tiger, so to speak, bring on the other side onto a podcast, and it backfired.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of pathetic. It just sort of made him seem, as many noted, and it was obvious watching it. It made him seem this kind of a very, very prominent Democratic governor being kind of struggle sessioned on his own podcast by this, annoying right-wing agitator, essentially, this kind of very intellectually dishonest guy who basically is just an advocate for one cause in all of his discussions and his agenda, and basically being somewhat humiliated by him on his own show.
He will become a character in his own right this week as well, Gavin Newsom. Bozu, as always, great that you're with us. Let's go over the channel. Let's go to London. Let's welcome John Sweeney, investigative journalist, broadcaster, author of Killer in the Kremlin, and founder of the VPDFO Festival in Ukraine. VPDFO, Vladimir Putin, do something off. Great to have you back, John. Thank you for being with us tonight. Let's talk about President Zelensky, because he was a kind of bit-pot player this week, wasn't he? At the end of the Davos week, he talked about, he seemed chipper, seemed far more positive. We've got this bipartisan group going on, the first time the Russians and Ukrainians are face to face. Can I ask you, are we on the brink of a ceasefire, John?
No.
Simple as that.
Yeah. Hey, one more.
Why?
So I completely agree with your brilliant reporter, who was obviously freezing to death in the snow in Kyiv. But he said, the expectation of a peace deal in Ukraine is very, very low, because they know who they're dealing with. They know that they're dealing with Vladimir Putin, and he is got a terrible track record for lying and lying and lying again. And these peace talks are really about flattering the silly Orange King in the White House and helping him shuffle that bit closer to the prize he will never ever win, in my estimation, which is the Nobel Peace Prize. Here's the problem. Putin wants Ukraine under his thumb. He wants to control Ukraine, and the Ukrainians do not want to be under Putin's thumb. Mm-hmm. And you can have millions of peace talks, but they're never going to square that circle. And for the moment, Putin is also, he's hitting all of the energy supplies in Ukraine. People are freezing, and obviously some of the old people will have died or in serious trouble because it's so bloody cold. But there isn't a peace to be had, in my view, because of the nature of Putin. The way we get to peace is by Europe arming Ukraine sufficiently well that Russia realizes it's never going to win this war.
John, many in Europe will know you from your reporting at the BBC, whether doorstepping Putin, whether documenting Scientologists. When it comes to your style of journalism, John, you've said this, quote, "I poke crocodiles in the eye with a stick." Are you still poking crocodiles?
Yes, I'm in talks with a publisher about writing a book about somebody big, but I can't talk about that. So I've just been clearing out my garage, actually, and I've come across an old picture of a friend of mine. I'm going to see if I can show it to you. And here he is. Can you see that? This is my friend Will Dawes.
Yeah.
2002, when we were undercover in Zimbabwe. Will, unfortunately, tragically had a heart attack last month and passed away. But there he is. You know, you're going through your garage and you see this stuff and you go, oh, we were undercover in Zimbabwe together in 2002. I don't know if you remember, but
the Mugabe
I hid in a car boot. I hid in a car boot because the Zimbabwean secret police were after me. And I'd been kicked out of the country once before, and I got in illegally without a passport stamp. And when I went to see Morgan Tsvangirai, the leader of the opposition, Will's idea was for me to drive in the boot. We got into the compound, and so none of the Zimbabwean secret police saw us. And Will said, shh, went round to the back of the boot of the car, opened it, and I said, "Hello, I'm from the BBC. Can I interview you?"
Amazing. And you brought us round to the fact that the current leader is nicknamed the Crocodile as well. And I haven't asked you, John, the most pressing news issue of the week. And going back to your first question, one word answer here, please. Team Beckham, Team Brooklyn?
Beckham.
OK. Great to have you with us, John. Completing the lineup, let's go to Washington, D.C. Let's bring in Andrew Feinberg, White House correspondent for The Independent. Evening, Andrew. It is great to see you. You have written a brilliant piece in The Independent this week, marking the first anniversary of Trump's second term. It is titled, "I'm a White House reporter. Here's a side of Trump's administration you do not see on TV." And you look at the overhaul in the White House press room, how it's utterly different from Trump 1 and Trump 2. Talk us through that.
Well, thanks for having me on. It's a much different scene than what we had to deal with during Trump's first term, but it's not all bad. The Trump White House press shop this time around, they're bellicose. You see them on social media attacking reporters, putting out lists of journalists who displease them. But behind the scenes, they actually get you information. It's not always useful information, but they respond to your queries. They get you statements. They're far more professional. During the first term, if I went back into the press office to ask a question, there was an equal chance that I would get just screamed at for something I had written weeks ago and not even get anything useful out of them. But this time they do have a bit more professionalism. On the other hand, they've stepped up their attacks on the press corps as a whole, even as they're more professional in dealing with individual reporters. They've banned the AP from flying on Air Force One because they won't call the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. They've tried to strong-arm news outlets by suing them and extracting huge monetary concessions from their corporate parents. And they've actually shut down the Voice of America, despite a judge's order telling the administration that, no, you can't do that. So it's a mixed bag, but it's not all terrible.
Andrew, you talk about one thing that fascinated me, the paradox of President Trump, essentially foaming at the mouth about fake news and biased reporting. And yet, to quote you, still the dirty little secret about Trump then and now is he actually likes reporters.
Yes. Going back to his days as a tabloid figure in New York City, he would call up reporters and give them quotes, sometimes posing as his own spokesperson, giving a different name, John Barron or John Miller. but everyone knew that it was Donald Trump on the other end of the line, and he is still known to call reporters directly or take calls from reporters. Mr. President, if you're watching this, Caroline Leavitt has my number. You should get it from her. But he loves the back and forth. He loves the give and take with the press. He loves those pool sprays, those exchanges in the Oval Office. He really loved during COVID when he just went into the briefing room and could command the networks to carry him for an hour, 2 hours at a time, often with disastrous results for his reelection campaign that year. And when he lost the election in 2020 and got to his what turned out to be temporary exile in Mar-a-Lago, he was dismayed to find out that there was no longer a pool of reporters waiting to be summoned so he could deliver his latest pronouncements on just about whatever he wanted.
Andrew, it is going to be brilliant to have your insight as well tonight. Thank you for being with us. Let's begin. Davos Congress Centre Tuesday morning, where Mark Carney and President Macron gave back-to-back speeches at the 86th annual get-together of the World Leaders Forum, the WEF, the World Economic Forum, a yearly international clubhouse for the rich, the powerful, the influential, halfway formal sessions, halfway diplomacy this year, charged with more consequential tensions than many before, with President Trump there. The showdown was expected after 2 weeks of geo-economic confrontation. As a curtain opener setting a clash between allies, the US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said that 8 countries were facing tariffs because of bizarre behaviour, he said, of sending their leaders and troops to Greenland in quixotic fashion. But the consequences of coercion were now clear. From underneath the aviators, this man, tiger-eyed President Macron, made clear he felt Europe was being bullied. Also, he was subjected to having his private text to the US President made public, text beginning, "My friend, dear Donald." There was none of that on stage.
But we do prefer respect to bullies, we do prefer science to plotism, and we do prefer rule of law to brutality. You're welcome in Europe, and you are more than welcome to France.
Other world leaders and politicians got involved. Gavin Newsom, governor of California, likely 2028 Democratic presidential candidate, as we mentioned a moment ago, said Europe needed to find its backbone. "I cannot take this complicity," he said. "People rolling over, they should have brought a bunch of knee pads for all the world leaders." Quote, "This is pathetic." After 24 hours and a meeting with the NATO chief, Mark Rutte, President Trump's Truth Social carried the news saying there was a deal. Talk of tariffs terminated. There was a framework in place. And this is how he explained the deal to Fox Business on Thursday.
Does this ultimately mean that the U.S. will ultimately acquire Greenland?
Well, I don't know if I can say that, but it could be. I mean, it's possible. Anything's possible. But in the meantime, we're getting everything we wanted, total security, total access to everything, have as many bases, have all the equipment that we want. And very importantly, we're building the Golden Dome, we call it.
So the Golden Dome, Trump's planned missile defence system of satellites, of ground sensors, of interceptors. Andrew, the framework deal detail we're still mostly in the dark on, I think. What happened and how do you see it?
Well, what happened was, as the Wall Street traders put it, Trump chickened out again. He pulled these tariff threats, not just because he might have gotten conciliatory talking to and some buttering up from Mark Rutte, the NATO Secretary General, but also because he saw stock markets tanking, going not quite straight down, but very much in the red since he escalated this rhetoric against some of America's closest allies. And the deal that he talked about, the concepts of the deal, the framework of the deal, looks a lot like the deal that's been in place in the form of a treaty between the U.S. and Denmark since 1951 that gives the United States the right to put pretty much whatever it wants in Greenland, wherever it wants. And in fact, at one point, we had multiple bases there. We even secretly burrowed under the ice there, trying to create a secret launch base for nuclear missiles. That didn't work because, as American soldiers discovered, the ice moves. It's not exactly a stable place to keep nuclear missiles or the nuclear reactor they had powering it. But this just is an example of how the U.S. has, for years and years and years, had carte blanche to militarize parts of Greenland, and nothing has changed. Now, Donald Trump has suggested that the U.S. might get some sort of extraterritorial sovereignty over those bases, much in the way the British have control over their bases in Cyprus. But the Danish government and the Greenlandic government have said that that is not in the cards, that transferring any sovereignty is a non-starter, but the U.S., pursuant to that agreement, is still welcome to do what they want.
That's a very interesting point, Tina, just to bring you in. Trump's team talking about how if they'd not gone for the maximalist approach, using economic coercion, the threats of a land grab, then we wouldn't be in this position. Andrew, listening to that, suggesting actually that we're not hearing anything different that was not on the table before. So 2 points. Is the Danish government, or how is it looking to Copenhagen, how this framework deal has taken shape? And is Andrew right that they are ruling out a kind of Akrotiri Cyprus deal that the Brits have in Cyprus?
Well, I think it's important to mention in adding to what Andrew said is that the US cannot establish new bases just as they like. They're not granted the right to just do that. They need to do it with an agreement with the Danish and Greenlandic governments. And
which could be the framework, which could be what's in
that
this
could
framework.
be the framework, exactly. So in order to start with this, Mette Frederiksen, our prime minister, already said, she had a meeting with Mark Rutte this morning. She already said that we need more NATO presence, permanent presence in Greenland, in the Arctic region, Greenland included. And there's been an openness to renegotiate the defense deal from 1951 that Andrew also mentioned. But the thing is that, yeah, as you said, Andrew, that there are already parts of that deal that the US can use as it is now, but we just need to renegotiate it. They cannot, like the part of the deal says that the US is implied or shall help defending Greenland, but it has to be in order. It has to be in an agreement with Denmark and Greenland. So all there is in the end is that, yes, we need to renegotiate. And the Danish government and the Greenlandic government has said, we're ready to negotiate, but that's not what Trump has been putting on the table until now.
Very interesting. John, all the sound and fury for 2.5 weeks. At what cost, I guess, is the question to European allies? We hinted at that right at the start with listening to President Macron.
The cost is grave. By the way, I thought that Macron looked absolutely fantastic in his shades, and I thought, he's just okay. He's going full on gangster. This is the Godfather. This is how to deal with Trump. The Elysee put out some nonsense that he had an eye infection, and I thought that's bollocks.
Tiger eye.
Macron being ever so cool. It felt to me that he's losing it. He tweeted this. There he is, fantastic shades. I thought that when Trump tweeted to the Prime Minister of Norway, because you guys didn't give me the Nobel Prize, then actually I want Greenland and I'm not interested in peace anymore. That was mad. It also struck me that there is no one in the White House in Trump 2, the second term, who's capable of saying, boss, don't do this because you'll look like a bloody idiot if you do. And what's happened is Trump said, okay, well, we might monster Greenland, we might get boots on the ground. Then Europe reacts as the only way it would do. Britain too, saying, don't do this is stupid, this is wrong. Stock market tanks, and then Trump reverses. And you're left thinking, number one is he doesn't really know much about the world. He's a fool. Secondly, there isn't anyone in the White House who can say, don't do this, boss, you're going to look stupid. The consequence for world security is everybody who can afford it is going to think about getting their own nuclear weapon, because you can't rely upon the Americans under Trump to guarantee world peace and world security like we did since roughly 45. And this is bad news for all of us, because it means that we're all going to start building our citadels, as the Canadian Prime Minister alluded to. But it's bad. It's also bad because the fascists in Beijing and in Moscow are looking at the Western world and seeing Trump, tear great lumps out of Europe and thinking, oh, this is good for us. And it is. It's good for the dictators. It's bad for people who live in democracies and believe in democracy. Trump is the fool. The quicker the Americans lock him up in a psychiatric hospital, the better, as far as I'm concerned.
Very, very interesting point. And to that point as well, I think on Macron, I think he started a trend, just to note Andrew in the background at the same time, looking very cool. And I must say, Henri Julien, which is the brand we think President Macron wore, Pacific SO1, they say the website crashed this week because of the interest. They retail for €659. Andrew, I'm sure yours are worth a lot more than that.
Not nearly as much. They're from an American brand called Randolph that supplies our military, actually. But I was just curious, who wore them better, do you think?
Well, we've got we can only give one answer right now. Surely it is you, Andrew. And to the point, Bozu, you can get your shades on any time you want. Let me ask your point about Gavin Newsom. You mentioned him at the start, saying European leaders have to grow some backbone in all of this. Do you think they did this week?
I think they were kind of forced to. I mean, confronted with this rather infantile and reckless and unrestrained. I mean, clearly Trump is like, I mean, let's call it as we see it. He's got some issues, like mental issues and physical problems, obviously. And you know, it makes no sense to say the emperor is wearing clothes when he isn't, clearly. And you know, faced with this reckless administration enabled by just a completely collapsed U.S. Congress, a Supreme Court that is just simply ineffective, except as a rubber stamp for the most far-right policies in the United States and worldwide. You know, basically, they have to defend for themselves. If there was any doubt that the U.S. or Daddy, as Mark Rutte refers to Trump, is going to protect them, I think that those doubts went out the window. And I think that, you know, Gavin Newsom made a really good point. Even as he couldn't stand up to a petty podcaster, he urged the Europeans, quite rightly, to stand up against Trump and not, you know, kiss his butt all the time, and not, you know, to sort of give him a taste of his own medicine. And we saw that with Canada, you know, that incredible speech in which he basically admitted that the entire world order is a lie. I mean, he sounded like some radical Marxist. He sounded like Noam Chomsky, this banker, talking about the real nature of geopolitics, so to speak. You know, and you know, it's basically people have to grow up, not just be standing up, but like understand that we're in a new world order.
A new world order to which, Tina, the populists on the right around Europe have been having a bit of a hard time this week, trying to align their kind of Venn diagram with where they sit with Trump, particularly Marine Le Pen's and the Rassemblement National's position here. Talk us through that dynamic.
Yeah, so it's quite, I would say, split in the different European countries. Since my area is France, I've been looking at Rassemblement National, and you know, they were part of the mega movement last year, the Make Europe Great Again. They had this big summit in Madrid where Marine Le Pen was there, saying like that this global movement that Trump was making was like she was saying like this, like. She was honoring it, you know, and they're sharing values like against immigration, anti-woke agenda. They share certain values, nationalistic values.
And then suddenly on Greenland.
But then when it comes to Greenland, well, I made an interview this week that it hasn't been published yet, but so I'll just tell the big scoop. Rassemblement National says that they have never been publicly, they have no alliance with the MAGA movement. They have no institutionalized connection to Trump. They say that they have, they share certain values in terms of, you can say like internal topics, like internal US topics and internal French topics in terms of values. But he said that they never shared foreign politics. Or the vision of foreign politics.
This is not a MAGA mini-me, essentially.
Yeah.
contortions.
So they're trying to withdraw all of the, like saying we have no connection to the MAGA movement at all, even though obviously there has been. But now they know that it doesn't look good because they want to show that we're strong in Europe and they're not gonna attack European sovereignty.
And it also depends how it looks in the polls, and it's not particularly popular what's been happening in the French polls right now, so it's interesting that they take that side, a conscious uncoupling, so to speak. Well, back at Congress Hall, Davos, this time 10:30 Thursday morning, a new mediation organisation coming into being, initially informally, called the Gaza Board of Peace. It is now officially the Board of Peace. And a sprinkling of world leaders and officials from 19 countries took their seat. Hungary's Viktor Orbán, Argentina's Javier Milei among them, watching as the US president took centre stage and talked of the origin story of the board to see Gaza rebuilt from root to fruit and beyond.
I think the combination of the Board of Peace with the kind of people we have here, coupled with the United Nations, can be something very, very unique for the world. It's for the world. This isn't United States. This is for the world.
Well, according to a leaked draft of the Charter, President Trump is chairman for life with the sole power to invite or reject member states. He can choose his successor if world leaders choose to be permanent members. The fee is $1 billion. And former British Prime Minister Tony Blair is a member. Notably, no Palestinian figures on the board. Current Western leaders were notable by their absence too, either alarmed at Putin's invite or worried about the effect of international order, with one-man judge and jury, an alternative organisation where you can pay to play. Bortu, start with you. An expanding portfolio, a leviathan of international challenges. First of all, rebuilding Gaza. What are you making of it?
I mean, you can't look at what people say in these sort of situations. You have to look at who they are and what their track records are. And here you have I don't know what else to call them, a club of, it's like Mar-a-Lago for, hardcore global despots. I think that's what this club is. And I don't think that they're going to do anything good for Gaza or the world, because they've done nothing good for Gaza or the world in the past, despite the rhetoric and so on. So, I mean, Donald Trump himself is financed by the most anti-Palestinian and anti-Gaza figures in the U.S. body politic. The Argentinian president is of similar political shade. And then you have a bunch of people from Kazakhstan and so on. They don't seem to have much respect for human rights and dignity in their own countries. Why would they have any respect and adherence to human rights and common human dignity in Gaza or anywhere else?
Well, Andrew, according to Trump's team, this is not about him. This is for the world, isn't it? This is also, could it be seen as a legacy move to incorporate a role for himself in power post-office as well? What do you make of it?
That's exactly what it is. This Board of Peace was initially supposed to be a Gaza thing. It was part of the deal that was reached to end or pause that 2-year-old war in Gaza that started after the October 7th attacks. And it even got UN Security Council approval. But in the weeks since that has happened, this has expanded along with Donald Trump's delusions of grandeur as a peacemaker who, in his estimation, really deserved the Nobel Peace Prize. And what we have here, if you look at that group photo, is sort of an island of misfit dictators. It's his friends. It's Viktor Orbán. It's Milei, you can see there from Argentina. These aren't people who are America's traditional allies, although Hungary is a part of NATO. But there are people who are not fans of the European democratic tradition and respect for rule of law and human rights. They're people who like money and power, and Donald Trump likes money and power. And by putting himself at the head of this organization, such as it is, in perpetuity, he can, in his estimation, according to people I have spoken to, keep himself in an esteemed place in world affairs, even when he is no longer president, because most people, when they are president, they stop being president, people stop listening to them. But Donald Trump wants people to continue listening to him as long as possible.
John, he's potentially peacemaker in chief now. He is doing it for the world, isn't he? What's your take?
Also in my garage, I found this. This is Hillary Clinton nutcracker. Can you see the?
Nice.
Can you see that? So I would. I commend my Hillary Clinton nutcracker lady to the Board of Peace. I take the Board of Peace and I go like this with it. It is nonsense. It's what he's doing is he's kind of reinventing his thing as the apprentice on this international stage, and the only fools who will take part are people who murder and torture and kill their oppositions. Not a single, no one from the great democratic countries. My great friends in Kosovo and Albania have turned up. I don't know why. Tony Blair has made a fool of himself. Two of the people who've been invited couldn't come, and they're Netanyahu and Putin. Why couldn't they turn up? Because they're war criminals. And if they landed in Switzerland, they might get nicked for war crimes. So it's a farce. Come on, America, deal with this fool that you've appointed, you foolishly elected. Get rid of him. I'm looking forward, all of us are looking forward to the midterm elections when Trump's in trouble. And soon this thing will go away and die. But for the moment, the idiot continues in his own fantasy world. And what's depressing is there aren't enough people around the world like Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, to say this is foolish.
Yes, and
Fair play, though, to Macron, the President of France, because the Shades sends a simple message. We don't like bullies.
Well, and to the point on Mark Carney, he's been disinvited now, hasn't he, for his comments he made in Davos. And to that point, Tina, Mark Malloch Brown, the former UN Deputy Secretary General, said this: we're coming out of a period of extremely weak UN leadership. This could be a call to action. Is this an unintended good consequence?
That the peace board meeting...
Essentially, this could be a time to start looking at seriously reforming the UN.
Well, the interesting thing is that everything that Trump does like push things. So even though we don't like the method that he's using, or that we criticize the brutality of it, it does make things happen. Like we've seen in Greenland, like we've seen with the European defense, the way that we've been stepping up our NATO investments. So I think that, and the UN has said itself also that they need to reform itself. It hasn't been able to work out the conflicts in the world. So maybe, like, I mean, as you said, it's a farce. Like, it's a joke to have two war criminals in your peace board. Like, it's about again with what Trump does. It's a show, and it's about personal legacy. It's a power play, but maybe this can, like he said, that it will not undermine the UN, but of course it's going to be a kind of, I don't know, like a competition to the UN. He said it will work in harmony with the UN, as I understood it. I don't know how they're going to work together, but I think it can definitely make the UN step up.
Bozu, this is a good moment briefly to mention this is probably a good time for President Erdogan, isn't it, where you are? It's a useful club to be in for him.
I mean, I think it could be. I don't even know. Did Turkey accept?
He's been invited.
He wasn't informed.
They're still waiting.
But he's been invited. I think that Turkey is, I mean, this is kind of a side subject, but I think Erdogan is kind of smart enough at this point. He might not join, or just because he's smart enough to know where his bread is buttered, and that is Europe. And he sees none of the, European countries are joining up except Orban, who is his friend. But it's economically insignificant for Turkey compared to the rest of the European Union.
Budgie, have you got any characters, any world leaders in the form of nutcrackers or Kagane or something different? Time to bring it out. Bring them all to the board.
I do have an Obama magnet somewhere. But
right.
I would have to dig
I
it up.
raise you the magnets. Time to see it at some point. I don't think he's been invited at this point. Maybe he will. Let's move to Syria, where the map has been significantly reshaped this week in terms of who has control. The forces of the President Ahmed al-Shara has been attempting to unify factions under one command. And since the start of the new year, they've been fighting to push out Kurdish-led fighters of the Syrian Democratic Forces, or the SDF, from the north of the country. These are areas that the SDF had held or gained during the civil war against the former dictator, President al-Assad. They've been doing the dirty work of the US and Western countries too. They've been holding and guarding around 10,000 Islamic State fighters in detention camps. The Syrian army offensive against the Kurds came as talks stalled with the government on the issue of integrating Kurdish forces into the Syrian military. The Kurds are reported to have miscalculated, according to Syrian analysts, in believing that the US would have come to their aid, and it didn't happen. On Sunday, after a lightning Syrian army offensive, the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces are said to have suffered almost half loss of its territory. So they agreed a peace deal with the Syrian government that is set for Kurdish fighters to be essentially integrated now, as well as handing over control of oil and gas fields. Fighting, however, erupting again, and now another ceasefire is underway.
It is a battle and a victory for all Syrians. God willing, it will be a good beginning for reconstruction, development and rebuilding, and for Syria to put an end to the current state of division and move towards unity, progress and leadership.
So this is a huge blow for Kurds who hope for autonomy inside Syria. They accuse Washington of betrayal for not coming to their aid. Andrew, how does the Trump administration see this? Is it on the radar?
Barely on the radar. The president has become very fond of the new Syrian president, despite his past as a Islamic fighter who the U.S. considered to be a terrorist. He's met with him. He likes him. He's called him very handsome. They're even dressed the same in that photo. He adopted the dark suit, red tie uniform that many of Trump's friends and allies tend to adopt when in his presence. And when Trump likes someone, he's not going to do things to undermine or harm that someone, especially when that someone is a leader of an oil-rich country who could provide some financial benefits to the U.S. or U.S. interests.
Bozu, just listening to Andrew, you've reported from Syria. This is a complex landscape. Syria's government say the Kurds have been holding areas where there's no majority Kurdish population, while the Syrian army is made up of many factions, and there are questions about how much control the president, al-Shara, actually has.
Yeah, I think that this has been part of the equation since Ahmed al-Shara took over Syria in a lightning offensive when his army toppled Bashar al-Assad with Turkish help. And the problem is not that it's a Kurdish enclave. Iraqi Kurdistan is also a enclave that has very good relations with everyone. No one is talking about dismantling that. The problem is that it is run by an affiliate of the PKK, and that is completely unacceptable to Turkey. So I think that is one part of the equation here. Turkey is very much aligned with Shara. I think that people, and I wrote it on my modest little newsletter that you plugged, I wrote a lengthy profile of Ahmad Shara some weeks ago, and everyone is constantly underestimating this guy. I mean, this guy has a lot of bandwidth, and he's, gone from, I think he's, as I wrote it, I think he's more like Fidel Castro than Osama bin Laden, and he has a lot of bandwidth, and he is, calculating. And, it was mentioned that there are oil riches in that part of Syria. They're not that extensive to want foreign powers to move in there. It's not Libya or Venezuela or something, but that is where a lot of the wealth of Syria is. And obviously that you're going to want to have control over it.
Yeah, the breadbasket of Syria for its wheat, for its oil fields as well, the main oil field being taken this week. John, you've lived the story in Syria. I remember a piece from you 10 years ago in the midst of the civil war from Aleppo saying these are the images that you won't otherwise see. And this was a city besieged. So you've invested time and reporting into this place. What's your reading of what's going on?
I feel, well, for Syria as a country to control all of its territory, that's a kind of good thing. And fair play to the new president, al-Shara. He is smart, and he's also smart to dress up like Trump. And you could see, I feel sorry for the Kurds as well, because they are the biggest population in the world without their own country, and they should have got a country, but they don't, and their population is split between Syria, Iraq, Iran, and Turkey, and that's a tragedy, and it's a continuing one. What's happened here is that the Americans have sided with Damascus, and the Kurds or the Kurdish entity is obviously in trouble and collapsing. I would expect to see that al-Shara will play this very sweetly. There won't be, I would hope, no horrible bloodshed at all. A lot of control, but not brutal, because his message to the Syrian people and all of them is: listen, I'm not Bashar al-Assad. I'm not interested in oppressing you. I want to lead you, and we've got to do this. We've got to have authority in a country, but at the same time, I won't be brutal and I won't go around torturing everybody. And if he sticks to that message, then I'm hoping that this trouble will ease. But essentially, it's because Donald Trump isn't interested in this part of the world, and that's a mistake, because of the danger that Islamic State poses to all of us. But for the moment, Trump's got the attention span of a goldfish, and he's not interested.
Yes, which brings us on, John, to just a final thought on that issue of Islamic State with you, Tina. The Danish, the French government, the British government, these are concerns about what is a gaping wound for many years, the amount of Islamic State fighters. What happens to them now?
Yeah, exactly. There's still, I think it's about 40,000 people that are still detained in the Al-Hol camp, which was controlled by the Kurdish forces. So the thing is that most of them are now, when we spoke mostly about it maybe like 5 years ago, when we decided that we would not take them back to our countries, they were small children. It's mainly women and small children. But now many of these children are 15, like they're growing, maybe in a few years they will be adults. And they will have probably a lot of anger and resentment against their Western countries where their parents are from. So this is a big deal. We should not forget about this in the Western countries.
No, maybe it takes us back to the Board of Peace and a useful job for President Trump's billionaire club. Thank you so much. Fantastic contributions from all of you panellists tonight. Invaluable on the ground. All of you, unique experience, unique insight that you do not get from any AI chatbot. Needed now more than ever. In the studio, thank you, Tina Kirkensgaard, correspondent for Politico. In Washington, thank you, Andrew Feinberg, White House correspondent for The Independent. In Istanbul, Pulitzer Prize-nominated correspondent Borzu Daragahi. Thank you, Borzu. And from London, John Sweeney, investigative journalist, broadcaster. Thank you, John. A brilliant nutcracker. We loved it. Author of Killer in the Kremlin. Thank you. Thank you for watching. Before we go, it's Oscar nominations week this week, making history. The vampire period horror Sinners becoming the most nominated film ever. 16 awards it's up for. And we will leave you with footage from a gem I've noticed in the documentary category. It's called Mr. Nobody Against Putin, a rare glimpse into the impact of government militarization and propaganda on the lives of school children, secretly filmed by the now exiled teacher Pavel Talenkin, and who's said to have given up everything to make this film. But like Paul Newman said as Cool Hand Luke, which received 4 Academy Awards in 1968, sometimes nothing can be a real cool hand. Stay cool. We'll see you in 7 days for The World Next Week.
Нет, Паш, не обижай людей. А еще вот здесь у меня флаг.
Я думаю, то, что ты сделал, может оказаться чем-то очень важным.
Войны выигрывают не полководцы, а школьные учителя.